Before time immortal, the dark and stormy nights arose from creation's primordial nectar, brought to this world as both muse and master, to deliver mortals from misery and the mundane. Welcome, lords and ladies, it's the dark and stormy nights. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. This is Loki.
I'm Odin.
I'm Tier.
And we're going to talk about some world building today. This is my favorite part. This is my chance to shine, right?
This is my big weakness. This is actually probably one of the things that I struggle with the most. It's one of the places that I feel the least imaginative and creative. And I feel like I always try to almost tie my worlds into reality, and I think that's probably a little restrictive and hinders some of the creative process. And actually, that controls the story in many ways, you know. So, I mean, yeah, this is definitely something that I'll be probably paying more attention to what you guys suggest, because it's definitely something that I have problems with.
Well, Loki and I have been doing it for years, just from, gaming, and eventually trying to design my own. We've had collaborative works on several book ideas we've been kicking around.
Our own shared universe.
Oh, yeah.
So
we have attacked it from multiple different directions and have lots of ideas about it. But to do this in an organized method that can actually be interesting to the audience, I went to Wikipedia to see how they phrased it. And I don't think I've learned anything other than maybe how to organize my thought.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's just, what do they call it? Because we have our own, I think, intuitive way we do it.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is we're scattershot. It's as needed.
Well, not for me. My world is a character, and in fact, it's the most important character when I write.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not
important that every other character may die at its hands. And as long as she survives, it's all that matters.
I'm just saying...
Yeah, this is definitely your strong suit.
I was just saying the methodology of building isn't necessarily organized. It just it grows organically.
I think it's both. I think that, for me, I do have an organized method. I know what needs to be addressed from the beginning, and it's what forms the foundational personality of a world for me. So I know that okay, these things need to be addressed. Science or magic. Science or magic,
Right.
Sometimes it can be both, and that's fine, but it has to have a good reason why both.
Well, do you mind if I go through my notes?
Sure.
So we don't jump around. All right.
I like House of Pain.
Okay. The way they refer to it is either top-down or bottom-up. And what that refers to is if you either conceive of your world as a whole, like it's... You may not know everything that's going on the ground, but you know the whole culture, the whole everything that's going on, like how, or it'd be easier to tell you what it isn't.
Do you need a moment?
Bottom up is like you have a city. It's rich, it's deep, you know where all the buildings are, you know its denizens, you know everything that's going on. That would be bottom up. It's when you're focused on the minutia on a very specific area. And another one that they called was inferred world building. And that's where you may detail a lot, but leaves enough information for the reader to guess at what's going on around them. You leave it kind of fuzzy. And that tends to be more often used in game settings or in shared universes like in the Star Wars novels.
Well, I think inferred is also a lot of people who just kind of go when they write. They sit down and they start writing. You can infer a lot of things and not really flesh out the details till later. I think that creates problems, though.
Well, yeah, you can eventually end up where inconsistencies and contradictions if you don't lay it out clear enough.
Right, yeah, and those contradictions become glaring problems later if you don't kind of have an idea of how it all works in the beginning.
If I can interject,
sure.
I'm a little confused as to what the first one was.
He skipped right over the top down.
The top down is just you see the world as a whole. You don't necessarily have it zoomed in to one specific area with everything fleshed out.
You have to write your rules, and I think that's what top down should be. Is you write your rules. What does it all work on? Right? Like I said, is it magic? If it's magic, how does the magic work? Is it science. If it's science, what science is allowed? How does the science work?
Right.
I mean, you can't have two different types of jump drives necessarily that work in two different ways.
Right.
And
well, that's why I was trying to start with this organization initially, so we're not talking about like 20 different things out of order, because once you figure out your methodology of how you want to go about it, then you actually start talking about what are you talking about, such as, is it on Earth? Is it somewhere else? If it is on Earth, is it our history or an alternative history? Such as we're doing with the steampunk.
Okay,
Sure.
so I think that maybe the top-down world building is where you build the overall generic rules of a world, and then you define the details as you go.
This sounds very...
Whereas bottom-up is you describe the details, and then you build the outside world.
It sounds very disorganized the way I think they addressed it. Personally, what I say is ask the biggest questions first, and work your way down to more
and that is the top
minute,
down.
right?
And
that's I think the best way to do it.
That's
So
the best way to describe
first, you have to ask
it.
yourself: is it Earth? Are these humans? If it is Earth, is there magic? Magic's a big question because
I was getting
fantasy
there.
and stuff like that. I felt like it was very confusing the way it was. Maybe Wikipedia addresses it.
I don't know. It could be my notes, but I'm just trying to,
Well, I'm trying to help Tyr here because she was saying that I don't know, as a world builder, because I do that more than anything. In fact, I think I sacrifice the story to the world that I'm writing in.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in trying to get all the different details or things that interest you that you get hung up on and be like, oh, this will become an important story, and you end up never using it.
Right.
But as much as it can be its own procrastination method, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it not have it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've invented over 200 species of aliens, all this technology that, works
Oh,
a
yeah.
certain way.
I've got
The history.
religions and histories that go back that would probably rival Tolkien if I ever publish.
Right. Yeah, I have a basic 500,000 year history of my universe. Knowing what aliens happened, what wars happened between the aliens, how the world or the universe got this way, major invasions and all that stuff. Right. Is there magic in it? I'm not going to tell you, but is there magic, or what?
All right, well, I think it would be best to use our steampunk for an example, but for those that aren't working in the setting, let me go off in the fantasy realm for a moment. Let's say we're not working on Earth, okay? The very first thing you want to do is make a map. Figure out what your landmass looks like. And the best way to do that is mountains. Because mountains dictate the tectonic plates, they dictate the rivers. And rivers, lakes, oceans, seas, all that, that's where you have your towns. That's where people are at. And the point in between, that's your trade routes, that becomes your kingdoms.
You might be right
Holy
for medieval.
moly.
I don't think that's necessary for anything aside from
Well, I'm saying for those out there trying to make the Tolkien-esque.
necessarily medieval.
Yeah, I definitely don't go into that much detail in my landscapes.
I've read plenty of
Maybe I
stories that
should.
take place in the course of several streets.
There are so
Right.
many fiction stories, though, that the very first page or the last page is a map. There are plenty of authors out there who love doing this kind of thing.
Sure, and if
I'm
that's
just
your
saying
thing, go for it.
And I'm just saying, that's your best route.
But like I said, like my story takes place in a universe. I'm not drawing you a map.
You know, you probably
Right.
should, though. Like, at least of, like, their travels through the solar system or whatever.
I think NASA sells it. You're welcome to buy that.
Or are you using actual, known...
And the inferred setting that we described before, or the inferred world building, that was just where you kind of figure it out as you go along, right?
That's
Where
what
it's
it sort
not
of seemed.
necessarily defined.
You don't spell it all out. You allow the reader
So it's
to fill
most
in a lot of
likely
it.
things that probably
I feel like it's
are
defined by the
stories.
characters,
Yeah, and I think that's probably the difference is that my books are more character centric,
Right,
whereas
right.
yours are more
Which is
world
cool.
based.
But yeah, I think that when you do that, when you do a character-centric story, you need to kind of keep like a file that when you do use something that's pivotal to the way the world functions, it's now that way from now on.
Absolutely.
So, always set in stone anything you've decided. And then if it doesn't work later, you're going to have to, of course, change that. So I don't know.
Right. So it doesn't matter your setting. You still have to keep track of your laws, your rules, your...
Sure.
Yeah, you don't want to ever have to retcon.
I don't really have to do this because I pre-plan my stories to such a degree, but I might suggest that if you don't do that, if you're doing the inferred style, right, then maybe when you're using something that is pivotal to the way your world works, is do the font in a certain color. That way you can go back, and if it doesn't work later, so say I did this type of magic in purple. So then I'm like, you know what, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. I can go back and look for any instance in purple and change it.
That is a great idea.
Oh yeah, a lot of my notes are color coded.
I only
especially Excel.
I do red, black, and green. That's all I do, and it's just specifically to do with different plot interactions.
Right. Now, working in the universe we're writing in with the steampunk. Okay, so you got your alternative history. What was the point of divergence? What's different about their reality? Why did it change? What pivotal point in history was altered?
I think there's so many great things that we could credit for this, right? I mean, I thought that what if the British won the
revolution?
Right. What if America never got started? It's still colonies. That could be an interesting thing.
I mean, it could be, but I mean, we were basing our story in London, so
sure, but
I don't know how that really impacts us to current.
Well, okay, so what we said caused the magic in our universe is the release of the Books of Solomon. That somebody got a hold of the Books of Solomon and they've gotten out into the world. Now I think technically the divergence starts way before that, saying that all magic is real, or not all.
Yeah, but that's not the only thing that's different. I mean, we have a rather large part of this population that are lycanthropes or other fey things roaming around. Now, are we saying that they always were there and nobody noticed?
Well, okay, here's my thing, because this is basically how I build.
Because I feel like it happened before all that.
Because for somebody who's actually somewhat unimaginative when it comes to world building, compared to you two at least, the way that I do it is I take current myth and I just say,
sure,
well, this came from truth, and so like that's kind of how I build my worlds. Is well, this is real.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's a reason that people don't know about it. It's a well kept secret. But it's always been real.
Sure, yeah, so the underworld always maybe was a thing.
Right.
And the current influx of magic is exacerbating the situation, maybe.
Right.
So some things were already here, maybe.
So you're saying the presence of the books itself is aggravating the balance.
Right, yeah. And so the veil, or whatever you want to call it, the thin membrane between this world and the world of the dead or the world of magic or whatever, it becomes so thin that things are just walking across now, and
I still feel like something would have taken place before that's led up to this. I really do feel like there's something else.
I feel like we've already addressed this in the story, though, because we were talking about the fact that magic was kind of kept under lock and key. A lot of these trinkets and artifacts and books and everything were locked up in a place where they couldn't be accessed by the world. And now all of a sudden they're being let loose. And that is kind of what's triggering all of this going on, right?
Yeah. Well, but that's I think that's what Odin's trying to define here is what was and what is being caused.
What's the inciting incident? And I do think it came before the books because the characters start off in a world that's already immersed in this going on.
That's true. It is inferred that this has been going on a while. And when we do infer this with Robert, because Robert was trading in arcane artifacts.
Right. I feel like it's got to be 20, 50 years deep. There's other things that have happened.
We've incepted.
I don't know about 50.
I don't know. So. But whatever the bishop's up to, it might be bigger than him.
Right.
Might have started before him, be part of an order he's in.
20 years still catches him as a younger man.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
25 years.
Maybe he started it, but like long ago. Like this is a long
We had already
plan.
mentioned him having a hand in the route of our more prominent bad guys.
Sure. Yeah, so there's definitely other things going on. I've always liked the myths and legends surrounding secret societies in London's elites and everything like that. And I think that maybe we can use a couple of those. Maybe we can invent one or two. I'm not sure if we want to use some of the ones that are believed to have existed, like the Hellfire Club and stuff like that. I mean, that could be interesting. I don't know a ton about them. It might take a little bit of research, or we can invent some kind of, dark, cults or
work our myths.
I'm pretty sure they're just trying too much on orgies, but
I'm sure, but there's no harm in us,
sure,
turning their orgy club into
supernatural things, or occult gatherings.
It's not like Ben Franklin's going to say anything.
I still have trouble imagining Ben Franklin in a nude pile.
Why are you trying?
Why? Yeah.
Because it's a thing. It's history, unfortunately.
I stop at the glasses. That's all I see. I see his glasses. We're good.
Just like peeking above.
Yeah, right. That's it. The top half of the bifocal, not the bottom half of the bifocal. We're
But
good.
yeah, all right. So you once you figure out if it's our world or not, if it's our history or alternative, you figure out your inciting incident. You got to figure out your time period that it's set in, the setting itself. So in our case, we're looking at turn of the century London. Beyond that, you want to know the technology. We're in steampunk, so they're a little more advanced than they probably would have been as far as like gears and steam power and all that.
So okay, and this is probably where we're more advanced than we would be in those times, right? Cars have been out for roughly 30, 40 years by the time
They're not really commercially viable.
But
that's Wild Toad's ride
what
at
I'm
best.
thinking is that steam engines have, of course, I mean, we're in steampunk, right?
Right.
Why wouldn't the steam engine be everywhere?
Well, they are in trains.
Well, so you can throw them on cars. There are, I mean, I was watching I don't know what you want to call a show, a documentary or whatever, and there's wood-burning cars in the
Oh, yeah.
documentary. So I was
Oh,
like,
that's
kind of
kind of
interesting.
fun.
So, why couldn't we have coaches that were...
I mean, they also had battery
wood
crank
burning?
cars. That was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't mind the idea of all the technology,
Mm-hmm.
We could do a lot of cool stuff with this.
Yeah, that's definitely cool.
So,
And don't forget, we're in the Cthulhian kind of mythos era of the turn of the century steampunk. So there's that whole glowing green goo. Nobody knows what it's for.
Right,
Why are you
mystery
boiling
juice.
it? What does it do?
Stirry juice.
Yeah, sure, it's probably a slurry of plutonium and other things you don't want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But, why not? Or it could be some kind of infused ectoplasm if we're actually, into an age where we're dealing with enough spirits or anything. I mean, ectoplasm might have some...
Yeah, I was figuring some sort of
You're right.
effluence from a alterplanar being of some kind,
So, or plutonium-infused ectoplasm.
Sure.
So,
It's never defined. It never is in these stories, but yeah.
Well, I don't think you need to define everything, okay? We don't need to say exactly, I mean, it's not like we know how dilithium crystal really works, do we?
I mean, then you clearly weren't following Jordy around enough. But
I feel like I do, but I'm pretty sure it's bullcrap.
So, I don't know.
But yeah, all right. So then once you figured out what the technology is, you got to figure is the climate change at all? So it's the same? I figure it's the same.
Weather?
Yeah.
Rainier. It's steampunk. Everything's rainier.
It's London. It basically is.
Yeah.
I mean...
is that how steampunk works?
Fog and rain. Isn't that how everything works?
Sure.
Well, it's all the steam.
Well, noir works with rain.
All that steam.
And you're in the right era for that.
All the steam makes it rain more.
Steampunk's
Well,
a little
London is rainy,
kind of
isn't it?
lighthearted for noir, but they're very close cousins.
Steampunk? No, I think you can pull them together.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying that. Then you got to figure, is there any difference in the culture? Which I don't see there being a huge difference.
We've kind of already established it's similar.
Maybe more British.
More British?
I don't know.
And then, of course, if it was an alternative world, you'd deal with the flora and fauna, which really wouldn't be much different here other than the lycanthropes and the
Well, okay,
fae.
yes, we have standard Earth flora and fauna.
Right.
And then there's this otherworldliness, right? All these otherworldly creatures, and why not a few otherworldly plants? It's not a bad thought, is that...
Like some fae plants come across.
Yeah, whatever. Like
Feed me,
death
Seymour.
blooms or something. I don't know if that's a thing. We'll have to make sure it's not so we can use it.
A what?
A death bloom or something like that. Some kind of...
Man-eating plants, huh?
Or a man plant. I don't know. I'm just riffing here.
Okay. And the last and only other thing that really was listed was, of course, religions. I don't, again, see a lot of difference other than we're going to have, the cults and stuff that were in that era.
Yeah, new stuff. So everything that's already here, I think, plus,
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, plus the technologies and the mechanical
and
aspect.
maybe like a cult of technology, right? Because if all this technology is blossoming, because we see it one way, right? We have this romanticization of what things might have been like in that age, but it really wasn't that fantastical, right? I mean, they didn't have TV, so I think they fantasticized things.
The discovery of the radio, the telegraph, all these things were amazing when they came out.
Yeah, but we discover at least twice that much every day now. You know what I'm saying?
It's easy to be jaded, but you got to realize what it was like to have nothing and then to have
No,
something.
I know. I'm saying they exaggerate these things, but to the average Joe on the street, meh. You know,
Are you kidding me? They listen to radio the way we watch TV. They had
Right,
Little
but
Orphan Annie telecast.
I think that what we need to pull into our steampunk world is taking some of the technology that we are taking for granted now and working it in some kind of mechanical, like steampunky way.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about with maybe the telegraph machine on the board or at the secretary's
Sure,
office.
yeah,
or
we were
whatever.
turning into
So
effects, kind of.
Yeah,
Well,
so
remember
they were still
Hammond
getting
teletype, whatever they call
communicator.
it.
messages.
Remember, Hammond created a communicator. You
Right.
had mentioned. So maybe he is on the verge of the cell phone.
Right.
So let's come back in a little bit with a little bit more of this. I like where it's going. Are you scared? You should be. Ooh, he gave me a chill. It's the dark and stormy nights, baby.
Okay.
So I like this exaggeration of what maybe bringing what we have into that time and building on it. So we have the cell phone nowadays, which would be helpful to them, but we know, of course, some of the stuff is unreliable, as it probably was back then.
Right.
But the sheer fact that you could communicate across air with no wires was amazing.
Right.
So the cell phone, that was magic.
Right.
So the fact that
Well, I mean, the era we're in, they're just firm. They're just getting firmly in the use of the telephone in most places.
Right. Yeah, so, the idea that Hammond has kind of made this two-way communicators cool as hell. Plus,
Right. I kind of pictured it more as like a walkie-talkie,
Sure.
but even so,
Right.
that's still...
Yeah, no phone numbers, but you have this one, I've got this one.
Right.
So, still total magic.
Right. And then, of course, in your Dale chapter, you actually described a lot of Hammond's scenery in his workshop as well.
Right, well, I felt, okay, so I didn't really super describe a lot of that stuff, but I feel like Hammond is using a mix of technology, just sheer engineering and magic, okay? I think that he is using the expertise of a couple of people, some we've mentioned, like Wilhelm, I think, is maybe sourcing some of his magic that he's using. So he might be going to Wilhelm and saying, hey, Wilhelm, I kind of need something like this. And Wilhelm might be helping him. I know we haven't talked about this much. And there's another character we haven't introduced yet that I'd kind of like to introduce soon.
Okay.
And that is Poppy Cox.
Yes.
And Poppy is our local snake oil salesman, but she is kind of like a Avon salesperson, but for snake oils. That work, though. Like, largely they work. But I think she's actually got a better...
So she's got, like, potions and...
Right, potions and poultices. It's Poppy Cox's potions and poultices.
Okay.
So, and I think she's actually got a better success record than Hammond. But, so...
All right, I can dig that.
So, but I think he might be going to her and Wilhelm to make some of his stuff work. But I also think that a lot of his stuff is sheer engineering.
Right.
That I think he's figured out how to charge things with a crank. I invented something for a chapter coming up I can't wait to use, and it's this helmet that he makes for Dale, that it's got a crank on the side, and he cranks it up really good, and UV lights, brightly shine on it, and it wards off vampires.
Okay.
And I think this is a cool thing, so it's like, I don't have to worry about Dale, I'll just turn the UV lights on his head.
Right.
If they work.
Right.
But, and then, I felt like his workshop is all these traps and contraptions that he's made to help him catch these.
We're actually not outside of the realm of what happened. I mean, you had radio as of like 1888. As far as like black light or UV, I mean that's color light therapy was a thing in the turn of the century. All this stuff existed.
Right. Well, where we get a little weird is, of course, some of his traps. I've created some of his traps because I started writing some of these side things for a thing we'll have coming up soon called the Hex Files.
Right.
And a few of his traps are warded or sigiled. Right, and what these do is they keep otherworldly creatures from getting out of them. Some otherworldly creatures can phase through walls or teleport or jump to the dead side, and his wards and various mix of like herbs and oils and stuff like that keep them from being able to use their abilities.
So he would be able to go to to Wilhelm to maybe get some sigils or like written word or whatever, and he could go to Poppy for these oils and herbs.
Right, yeah. So between the two of them, he could put together some stuff that'll help him catch, of course, his arch nemesis, brownies.
Right.
So
build a better trap.
it's going to take a bit, and I think he's still experimenting with it. But yeah, I think his shack is a world of wonders. And if, of course, any human walked in that shack, they might notice a few oddities about it. But I like this idea, and I don't think he's unique. I think this is that age. I think that there are those who might have been better at it than him, those who might have been worse. But this is kind of the in vogue thing at the time, right? Is to be this cool engineer, And of course, Hammond has a past we haven't talked too much about yet, have we?
I don't think we've talked about Hammond's past at all.
So, but it might come into play eventually. I'm not sure if we want to share it yet. But because he comes into play with some of the Hex Files characters that we talked about. So, but yeah, no, this is kind of like the cool in vogue thing to do in these times. It's, either you're an occultist like an Aleister Crowley type, or you're this inventor like a Tesla type, or a
Right.
Actually, Wilhelm Constrato's realms, because he's kind of
he's a pop psychologist, occultist,
chemist.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Renaissance man, is what I was trying to say. Which was a little easier back then, because we didn't know as much about any one field.
No, you didn't have the distractions of television either.
That too. So if you were halfway clever, you could master a few fields, without as much effort as it would take today.
Sure, and there was less regulations on what you were allowed to do in your own home, right? I mean, you blew your house up. Nobody's going to press charges.
But I don't see Hammond as necessarily being the inventor of the radio or anything like that. I see him more like the guy in The Fly. I forget the character's name, but like he invented the teleportation pod, but he didn't invent anything in it. He just stuck a bunch of things that other people had built and put them together.
Tesla invented the oscillator. Marconi took the oscillator and made the radio. So that's kind of the same thing.
Right. What I'm saying is
there are very few foundational inventors.
I see him as gluing a lot of things together and making really weird contraptions.
Right. Well, I think that was common in the day, though. So yeah, we have a lot of cool tech. I think that I don't know. Originally, I thought that maybe the crew was one of the few steam-driven coaches on the roads, and now I'm starting to think that maybe they aren't. Maybe that the steam-powered coach is fairly common. What do we talk about? The trolleys? There might be.
I do. Yeah, I wanted to look that up. I didn't get around to it, but yeah, I do feel that London would definitely have a lot of trolleys.
So maybe they don't have the double-decker
That
bus
makes
yet,
sense.
but maybe the double-decker trolley.
They probably do.
So it was already like an age of invention almost, and we're just kind of expanding on that with the steampunk aspect,
Right?
And just making it kind of cooler.
Sure, yeah. But I still think the world is probably a bit dirty, coal-driven, right? So sooty.
Oh, of course.
And damp and dark. So we've determined that there is magic. Now I know that this is where I'm weak on where our world is. I know that based off of the Books of Solomon, which was largely summoning and everything, the first conclusion I drew, but we didn't really discuss it, was that most of the magic is creatures. What else is there? Is there pure magic? Is there
I think
fireballs and death rays or...
Oh, no, I feel like we've addressed spells and like summoning and stuff out of the books. We discussed objects that can contain magic.
What about mediums? Are mediums real?
Well,
why not?
That might help with
Palmisters?
Robert's
situation.
situation.
I think people who delve into the occult or play, they got 1 foot in. Some of them are just charlatans, and some of them accidentally do things that work out.
And I think some are still charlatans,
and
right?
some are unique, or some are actually skilled.
Right.
I think it's a hodgepodge. Off topic, but they did have electric trolleys since 1901.
Okay, but we're just saying probably, 10, 20 years sooner than that. So...
Not even necessarily. We said somewhere between, 1880 or 90 and 1920.
Right.
So we're within that time frame.
Yeah, I figure we're probably
It's
around...
not exactly far-fetched.
1910-ish, I feel.
Right. I'm not sure I ever cared to definitely define the age or anything, but...
Right.
We wanted to be pre-World War.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like where things go.
So magic, we're saying there's magical objects.
Yeah, we did mention the magical
Books?
objects, yes.
Spells. But are we saying that people actually, aside from were creatures, which we said kind of traditionally have had like an almost earth magic that causes their shifting but doesn't necessarily give them any kind of magical ability to harness, aside from shifting?
Yeah,
right?
I'm not sure they can do much besides shift and the things that come with shifting, right? Because, I mean, the lore always said that they could heal when they shifted.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a cellular change. They would have to have regeneration of some
Right.
kind. But on top of that, low light vision, you know,
Yeah, things
enhanced
natural to the
hearing,
animal,
sight,
Right, but those
If
are
I'm
animal
if I'm become a
aspects.
wolf,
They're
right, I
not-
can
yeah.
smell better, I can
Right.
maybe see
Yeah,
better.
but that's huge.
Sure it is.
I mean,
but
your
it's also
dog's
not the
smells
same
like-
thing as throwing an energy ball. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right, yeah,
So
they're-
that doesn't necessarily
they're not Goku.
define beings with magic aside from shifters.
Okay, but
So are we saying are the witches, sorcerers?
that's what I'm asking, yes.
Yeah, why wouldn't there be?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of kitchen witchery.
I don't think
that's
it's common, but-
What do we say? That might be something Poppy delves into.
Right, right.
You know, so Poppy's dealing
So
with this kind of
kitchen
kitchen
witchery?
witchery. You know, where they could like brew up things. They know the maybe magical elements or whatever that can be put together in the right way to
Right.
get certain effects. You know, I realize that some of this is, of course, modern herbalism and alchemy and stuff.
Right.
Where they're really only brewing a hypnotic because they're using the right mushrooms or something. But maybe not.
Right.
Maybe this is magical, you know?
Right.
So-
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the herbs do have properties, you know, much like a lot of foods or pills or, you know, like there's definite things to play with there. Whether it necessarily equals magic is a whole other thing, but...
Me and Loki were discussing on the phone that we were thinking with Poppycock.
Cox. Poppy Cox.
Cox, that's
C-O-X.
right. Cox, right. That's right. Same diff. Everyone knew the pun we were going for. At any rate, is that she might actually get one of these actual legitimate books of magic and actually do alchemy through herbalism.
Sure. I don't think anybody knows that's what
I don't
she's
even
doing.
know if she
just
fully understands it. She's
strangely-
just following
just
the
thinks
formula.
it's a recipe book?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
she is just strangely the best at what she does. No other snake oil salesman is as good. Their products aren't working like hers do. You
Right,
know?
right.
So maybe she has a little inherent magic in her bloodlines.
Maybe she's a witch. You know, deep down, maybe doesn't know it. You know?
Or she can follow a recipe.
Well, that's a question.
I don't know.
Are witches is witchery? I guess hereditary, or is it? You know, is it something that you can just be? You know, can anybody be a witcher?
I think you probably have some sort of disposition towards it. You know, like
An ability?
you know, a random genetic something. I don't think
So
it's
it could be in there, but not necessarily. Your mom wasn't necessarily a witch, and now you're a witch. It's more like anybody could be a witch,
Right,
You
but
just don't
kind of
necessarily.
like
Some
anybody
bloodlines
could be
might
an
have
artist.
more.
Your talent just, you know, depends on whatever. Like, I feel like there's some like genetic kind of link to artists, right? But at the same time,
maybe.
the fact that you've got an artist
certain
as a relative doesn't mean you can draw.
right-brandedness. You know, I could see that.
Yeah,
drugs.
drugs.
I don't know.
Okay, so all right, so there's a vague kind of
Speaking of drugs, though,
link.
is drugs a thing? Like,
Dude, everyone did. It was so common in the turn of the century for people to do coke, to do a bump.
okay,
You
let's
know?
discuss drugs then for a minute. I like in games.
They
and
call it
stuff like
snuff,
that,
I believe.
when drugs are used, like superpower inducing, if you will, right? But of course they're not.
Oh no, they
But-
treated it like caffeine.
If in a steampunk world, the cocaine, or you take that huff of something, and you got super strength.
Yeah, they had
for
little snuff
10
tins,
minutes,
like
you
an
know?
Altoids
Like,
thing.
see, that's what I think Poppy's selling, right?
like the mushroom in
Yes, exactly.
video games?
Yeah, you drink the potion, and you can shoot fireballs out your ass. Like that's what I'm
So
talking about.
maybe Poppycock does have some kick-ass shit to sell, then,
That's what I'm
right?
saying. Well, I mean, I think you could get something that works from almost any snake.
I don't
oil
think it'd be
salesman.
that overt.
I think that Poppy's has the least negative side effect and works most often. But I think you could go to that guy in the corner and get one that gives you super strength, but then you feel really hungover and weak the next day.
Well, and that's something we probably need to define, right? Is there a trade-off
I think
for
there is.
magic?
I think.
Is there a cost?
I think that's
Well,
kind
When
of
they- when
you
they
feel
use a spell?
drained. You know.
yeah, maybe.
No. But like when our bad guys are doing these spells and
Well,
things,
that's
like
what they're
obviously
sacrificing.
when they created Dale, they had a sacrifice.
Right.
But when they're well, no, that's true.
think it's a
We already
trade-off.
set up a sacrifice for when they call the Jorogumo
Right,
as
that's
well.
what their trade-off is they're committing dark magic. Dark magic requires sacrifices. That's what makes them
Okay.
evil.
So when our good guys use these,
Well,
these
then what
magic,
the things are calling up, the things they're doing.
Maybe, but I don't know. I think Karen Bull's a reasonable person. Nonetheless,
You think what?
Karen is a reasonable person.
Oh.
I don't think she's a person, but okay.
That's racist.
Sure.
Anyways,
I think if you have more than 2 legs, you're not a person. Just, putting it out
so
there.
narrow-minded. Nonetheless, you've totally thrown me off track. My point is that they're mitigating the consequences of magic with a sacrifice.
So we're saying magic does have a cost.
I think everything has a cost.
Of course.
Everything
Okay.
has a cost. So, cash, gas, or ass. Nobody rides for free.
Lovely.
I mean, it's like the difference between herbalism and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals is just high grade. So the side effects are greater. The effect is greater. The side effects are greater. Everyone's like, do natural, homeopathic, whatever, and it won't hurt you. Well, it might, or it might have an interaction, but it's usually slight.
Might do nothing at all.
Yeah, right.
So
I think it's much like that. It's like it depends on the intensity and what you're doing.
sure, yeah. Concentrate this, don't concentrate that, whatever. But
so we're saying an equal cost for your magic.
Well, if it's alchemy, if that's what we're going to go with for the
Right.
potions and stuff like that, if it's alchemy, of course they have the law
of equivalent exchange.
Right.
Right.
But that's a thing. I mean, and I agree with it. I think it's a good way to go.
I definitely lean
You
that
are
way when I
paying
use
a price.
magic in books.
So, otherwise, what's the downside? Why not just throw around fireballs all day?
Right.
I mean, there's always got to be a downside to it.
I do not want to go so overt as I were having fireballs down Main Street because I think that breaks the reality, and
That's why
London
there's a
itself
cost.
no longer would be a secret. They would no longer be on the down low.
Sure.
It would change the society completely.
Well, I think that the minute you have a chaotic thing like this rise, right, something like magic, which is an unknown quantity, rises up, something rises up to regulate it or crush it.
Right, there tends to be
and
balance.
so that's what I think maybe that we've just led ourselves to, is what is the regulating force or what is the crushing force against magic. And I guess that would be
the group.
Yeah, Desmond, but then he's using it, so it's like, is he
yeah,
really
he's kind
the
of
regulating
not
force?
like
When he is certainly not helping,
right. Yeah,
No,
you
I'm talking
can't-
about the group is policing all this and running around as
Oh, yeah,
Ghostbusters.
but not well.
The group is not
Well,
not
they're
yet.
just starting, and it's a comedy. They're not supposed to win all the
The
time.
group is not necessarily anti-magic, though.
No.
They're anti.
But they're a balancing force, is what I'm saying. See,
Actually, they're not even anti-anything yet. They're really
Yeah.
just, you're going to pay me to get rid of
Desmond
this, right?
is not a balancing force. He's Thanos. He wants to cut it in half.
Yeah,
it's extreme.
Well, no, he doesn't want to cut it in half. He believes in zero sum. He's the only one who should be wielding any sort of magic.
just
And that's just to
humans.
make sure that magic no longer affects this world.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there might need to be an outside force beyond the team, beyond him, something.
Well, wouldn't it be like the coming of the Inquisition?
Well, okay, so yeah, Talbot trying to raise... So maybe Talbot has...
I refuse to see the Inquisition as a force for good. I cannot
not-
make that leap
it's
in my
not
head.
a force
I
for
can't make that
good.
leap
It would
in my
only be a
head.
force for good if you see magic as an overall bad.
Right,
and
but magic is
isn't
not
an overall-
bad.
Yeah, it's a neutral thing.
Right.
But that is what the bishop is trying to bring about.
Right. And so, but the annihilation of magic and creatures is not the happy ending.
It's just a brick on the other side of the teeter-totter.
Right.
That's all it is let's
I don't
go
know.
the other way.
There
And
could
then
be-
you're going to have a counterfaction to that. There's nobody trying to balance
There could be
things.
forces
Right.
behind the scenes that are helping this party succeed.
Well, I think Robert is one of those forces.
Oh, and then we discussed maybe something with the Hex Files as well there.
That's true, yeah.
I'm saying larger, more powerful groups or
Yes,
entities.
that's
Yeah, we've
something
discussed that.
We've touched on as
and
well.
we're going to, I think, introduce that slowly, like very slowly.
Yes.
So, okay, we have that worked out. That's pretty good. What about the rest of the world? Is London, is
Overarching
Britain the only thing that matters?
No, we've already established that. Oh my God, I keep forgetting your name. Jennifer. Actually, I believe she was French in origin.
Was Jennifer French?
I believe so.
I don't.
Oh no, she was Eastern European, I believe.
Okay, and then Zara is from Spain, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I do have
Hammond
notes,
is
believe
from
it or not.
Scotland. Wilhelm from Germany. So, I think I have a device that I created that is from China. So there are some things playing in the rest of the world. I'm just curious, are they suffering the same kind of fate London is? Is there creatures popping up everywhere, or is this pretty close to home?
I feel like it would be pretty close to home considering our overarching bad guy is local.
Okay, so
He's the one who's causing all this chaos. He's the one who's releasing everything.
so right now we're close to the epicenter.
And
of
his
this.
audience
East
is
European.
close, right?
So,
But yeah, I was saying is that she is aware of these books. She has a magical background. There are things in motion in other parts of the world. I just feel like London is the epicenter of what's going on,
Yeah.
and the ripples are going throughout.
okay, so we're all in agreement. London's kind of the epicenter. But yeah, we'll get little trickle-outs from here, things that are going on the rest of the world.
Sure.
Now, I think that because we said that magic artifacts and things like that don't originate here, that they've just been kind of gathered into a couple of small places, that some things may pop up in other places.
I think they tracked
That-
each other. They're consolidated.
Maybe, but like I said, I have an artifact that came from China, and that's just how it is. I mean, not everything
Well,
came from London.
But we kind of had the idea that everything was like gathered and locked away.
Yeah, but
Well, the Vatican.
I don't think you could possibly get
Right.
everything, right? I mean,
No,
there are
no,
some things
absolutely
still in the
not.
world,
But I
so.
mean,
But
these
as far as-
things that have been locked away for so long, and that's why they weren't a factor, would have been
Right.
gathered from all over.
Yeah.
And now they're kind of being released.
And you're also going to have private collectors, as far as like your whatever the
Right.
Chinese artifact you want to talk about. That, I mean, with trade and everything, things have been moving around for a while. There's going to be things all over
Right.
the place pulling in different.
So we're agreeing that it's fairly artifact heavy.
Yeah.
Is most
I think
of our
so.
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better if it's old
Objects,
world
books,
magic
spells.
versus.
Our merchandise brings all the boys to the yard. Go see why on our website at thedarkandstormyknights.home.blog.
Say is that like we're in the turn of the century. It's
Sure.
it's a time of man. Magic's on the wayside. It's waning. It's only starting to make a resurgence, and that's kind of a blip on the evolution of man.
Well, yeah,
eventually.
we're kind of in the age of occultism where people are kind of looking for something new and different.
Well, it's nostalgia. With the rise of science, you're cold, empty.
Well, it's not
Religion
just
feels
that.
empty and dead. And then
This is also the age of adventure, right? And so as these adventurers went
Right,
around the
right.
world and they discovered what they perceived as primitive cultures, they discovered new religions, things that they didn't understand and they were worried about.
right. So that's what I'm saying. It's a romantic callback.
Right.
So what the most powerful magic is going to be a more subtle than a fireball, but it's going to be locked away in some kind of statue or a coin or a this or a that.
Right.
So I feel most of the magic of our world should be those kind of things being utilized versus someone directing it. That kind of person should be an anomaly, not the mainstay.
So any like we always use the fireball down Main Street example.
'Cause it's
something
so
like that is
crass.
really something to worry about because that person is like out there.
Oh yeah,
right?
but
not only
it
magically,
would
but probably mentally.
If you believed it, if there was video and you couldn't argue and you couldn't call it special effects, it would change everything about society. Everything would change on a dime,
yeah.
and that is bad for story.
Inquisition would come to life.
Right.
Many
Well,
things.
I'll tell you what, though.
I don't know.
That is something that you might wonder with some of these things, right? Because you have Hammond out here wielding some pretty neat pieces of technology that some people might question, is that magic? Because I think he might have a strange small handheld flamethrower.
I don't know if it makes
the
a
flamethrower wasn't invented yet.
If it makes a spring noise, it's got a little hand crank.
I mean, they're
there's
very
steam coming out of it.
obviously clunky mechanical things with the steampunk.
Yeah,
vibe.
people will accept it.
I'm just saying that
They'll look at it
the
twice, but they'll accept it.
mechanism is very close to magic in some regards.
In fact, I think it would almost be the opposite because people will see things and think, because they don't want to believe it.
Well, maybe
Right.
that's what covers it up, right? So maybe
and I
it's,
think that he could even get away with mixing magic into some of his devices, and people would assume that it's tech.
He is Iron Man of this time period. Okay, it's almost unbelievable, but you can accept it.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, but he's not the only one, right? I think we should. It would be nice to meet another Hammond, like another engineer that is.
An evil Hammond.
But I don't necessarily know evil, but maybe.
Does he have a goatee?
Maybe the agent can have a source.
Well, yeah, we discussed something along those lines. So, like James Bond has Q.
Are we coming back now?
So we're in now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So yeah, like there could be, just like James Bond has a Q division,
Right.
So I think that I don't know. I feel like that is a thing, even if that was never a
So
thing.
that
Well,
would,
we
no,
did-
but that would
We
play
did
into
talk
that one.
about a Scotland Yard and an MI6
yes.
equivalents.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, they might well have Hammonds, better trained, better supplied, better equipped Hammonds with better looking technology,
So, hey,
less clunky.
he has feelings.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Does he?
If you got a government contract, you're going to put out things that look better than Hammonds. Will it work better? I don't know. Here and there, maybe, but
Well, but wasn't that kind of like the...
Hammond's got a pretty high failure rate.
yeah, and he's also making stuff out
But-
of underwire of a bra. So I mean,
Yeah, no, he's a great salvager. But my thought is that Scotland Yard guy, yeah, he can take out a couple guys with his thing.
I was going to say the most futuristic thing we
Hammond
have
can
is
take
bras.
out
Actually,
entire walls. So
A barn.
yeah. I mean, there's really no limit to his capabilities. You're thinking too small in his eyes. So I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, so but if you're going to make these Hammond-esque characters working for other groups, are they going to be doing the same thing that Hammond is? Are they going to be trapping little creatures and trying to extract magic?
no, they're not field people.
No, yeah,
These are
they work
techs.
in a lab. Yeah,
Okay.
they're too prissy for
So
that shit.
what you're going to end up is
So there's purely mechanical, no magic involved.
Right.
You're going to have a British version
Yeah,
of
that's what
Archer
makes him
roaming
superior.
around with this clunky device that he doesn't know how to operate.
In fact,
that's what you're going to
I
end up
would
with.
not put it past Hammond to be collecting brownies to drop into their workshops.
How would he know where they are if they're working on a government contract?
Did we discuss Hammond's past?
A little bit.
I don't recall.
So you're
Right.
saying he knows these people?
I think he knows some of them.
Okay. Well,
You don't get
Okay.
as good as Hammond without kind of...
Well, when was the first World Fair?
I don't know. I mean, something we can look up. Okay.
right. Okay. I
But-
guess. So you're saying this is like an age of steampunk invention, and there's Hammonds with probably better track records all
Not
over.
Hammond's. I don't know. I think there's a different flair for each, right? I think that the reason Hammond has failures at the rate he does is that Hammond goes for broke. So
Well, it was in London in
Oh, because
1851.
he's thinking bigger. Is what you mean.
right. Yes, I'm gonna get the most boom out of this. And on top of that, he's salvaging.
Right.
He doesn't have a limitless budget
Right.
like these guys do.
Right.
He's using, like we said, underwire, or whatever, the screw off a chair,
Right.
So
Okay.
you get what you get.
Well, you were saying that he might well know these other agents.
Some of them.
Well, the thing is, not only may they had same schooling, the first World Fair was in 1851 in London,
So he might,
and they probably had more than a few
It
since.
might have inspired him to become who he is.
Okay.
We said he's older.
40.
All right.
Well, I'm figuring like 1910, but I'm sure the World Fair has returned a few times.
They're every 5 years they're held somewhere else in the world. So, I'm hoping to go
But
to
I'm
the
just
one
saying,
in Tokyo in 5 years.
We're well in the rise of science and that enamorment that everyone had with the all the new science.
I don't know how that's never ever not a thing. Personally, this whole idea is fantastic to me.
Well, people get used to things,
So yeah, I don't know. I think humans are very boring in that regard. I see Hammond the way, I don't know. For me, I get inside of Hammond's head, and that's how I create some of this stuff. This is how I come up with the inventions and everything. Is I get inside Hammond's head, and I'm like, okay, if I could make anything, and I'm in his situation, what do I do? Of course, machine gun crossbow. Wacky traps, whatever. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys ever?
They had Gatling guns, right?
Yeah, but that's hard to carry. Those are heavy.
Yeah, no, they were.
Yeah.
They were water cooled. They had them since Civil War.
What
They
is
were
it?
huge.
And then you're gonna buy bullets.
Gatling gun. Well, it would be better than a crossbow unless you're going against vampires, which would make sense that he would invent it after
Yeah,
that.
shoot stakes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm saying is I wouldn't have him inventing it until he had a need.
Okay, so I actually have questions about the setting outside of Hammond. Are we done bragging about Hammond at this point?
No, I just think that he drives
And
this
his
to-
glorious
Yeah,
awesomeness.
I don't care.
Yes, his glorious awesomeness. Like the house itself, are we throwing in more? Because I think that we talked a little bit about the house itself having a little bit of a steampunk vibe, but how extensive is that going to be as far
I
as
think
our
it's
setting
ridiculous.
goes?
Okay, we talked
Pneumatic
about the job
tubes.
board.
We did, and we
Pneumatic
talked
tube isn't
about
bad.
we talked about Hammond maybe having influence over the different technologies in the house, and maybe not everything always works the way that it's supposed to, so it's not all encompassing because they'd get annoyed with him. But
I thought he might have manipulated the boiler to operate pneumatic doors, so that you can just flip a switch on the wall, the door opens or closes. You know,
Easy
one
enough
of
to
you
do.
mentioned a horrifyingly dangerous bread slicer or something.
yeah. I mean, yeah, things like
But that also means that they probably have the giant, creepy furnace from the Burbs. Some giant boiler of doom.
Oh yeah, it's probably ridiculous. Yeah, yeah I don't know. There's
Which means there's definitely a coal shed out the back or something.
well, I imagined it was in the basement. I don't know.
Well,
Isn't
there's
that
like
how it's
a
done?
there's like a window door thing, and then like you shovel it in.
Is it supposed to be out back?
What?
There's
A boiler?
yeah, you have like an overhang awning kind of thing, and like a whole thing of coal, and like this window opens up, and you drop coal down. And
Yeah, there's like coal chutes or
Yeah.
something on the back of old houses.
I always assumed it was in the basement. I know.
It is in the basement, but it comes from outside. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
what are you gonna do? Track it through the whole house?
Yeah, I don't know. No,
I don't actually.
I don't know how
anything
this
about
works. Everything's pumped right into my house. I'll be honest. I'm rather
Well, we've already
lazy as
established
far as
the
this
lineage
goes.
of the telephone, and that they have the that teletype looking thing like the stock market would get off.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a little telegraph machine.
So they have that.
Right, so there's that, like I said, the job board. Okay, I'm not against the pneumatic tubes. It's not bad.
Well, if they have pneumatic doors, why wouldn't they have pneumatic tubes?
I mean, of course, I imagine they have the dumb waiters and everything
Sure.
in the house. What else can you possibly have? I don't know.
So are we saying like, he controls the water and the heat and everything, and they're taking a shower, and all of a sudden it goes ice cold and then scalding hot and like all that because Hammond's got his hand on everything?
Oh, that would suck if he's doing a project and he's diverting pressure. Oh, I'd be so furious.
I mean, I don't know. I might drive everybody to take baths rather than shower.
That's true.
So,
Oh.
and I haven't. I don't
As
think I've tried
miserable
to
and
shower
cold
yet.
as
Zara takes a
England
bath.
is often billed as, you're in the
What?
middle of a nice hot shower and then it just cuts to ice cold. Ooh.
Yeah, I imagine some security measures, probably more violent than they need to be. Trap doors maybe. At the front door.
Well, I mean, if you could make everything pneumatic, you could put freaking hurricane shutters up.
Right.
The dark is slammed shut and
Yeah,
bolt.
so they could probably put
that's
the whole
interesting,
house on
like
lockdown. Yeah, and a
feature.
flip of a switch or something.
I mean, it wouldn't be cheap and it wouldn't be easy,
Well,
but he could do it.
If it's going steampunk, I would go with the pull of a chain rather than a flip
Yeah,
of a switch, but
yeah.
or a pull of a lever.
Right, right.
Something like that. So there's probably some kind of control wall or something.
Yeah, it'd probably
somewhere.
be a lever because you're diverting pressure. And yeah,
Right. So yeah, things like that.
God, the fortune in copper in that
trap
house.
doors. You know what? Maybe some secret rooms.
Wasn't uncommon. If
I'm
it's a
not saying
halfway
this is Hammond's,
sizable
I don't think
house.
this is Hammond's doing. I think this is Robert's doing.
I was gonna say
because of what's Robert.
Oh well, given his
profession was.
occupation, I was just
Right.
saying the size of the house itself.
I
We often
gotta
had them
wonder
anyways.
If there isn't a secret room that
or like an
that
archives
Meredith
kind of
doesn't
thing.
even know about.
I mean, don't forget you have crawl spaces and all kinds of like normal hidden spaces in a house,
So
just from the design of
there
the
might
time
be a
period.
room full of like magic artifacts and books,
Right,
and
which
stuff.
he was always stealing when he was alive.
Right. And brokering, he might have had some deals half brokered and unfinished.
Right.
So could be interesting. Nice little Easter egg somewhere left for someone. So
Yeah,
I
that
don't know.
is
Does the house need much more than that? Does the average house have much?
Or are they special because they
Automation.
have?
I mean, other than a milk chute.
Well, I think they are special because of Hammond, but I think that if there is some automations available on the regular, I think maybe the average house would have it. I never realized what a status symbol of bed was.
I suppose they could have like really silly crap that was very popular back then. Like they had vibrating belts that was supposed to make you lose weight and all that stuff.
Well, that was what, the 30s or 40s?
I
or
think it was
something
long
like
before that.
I don't think it was that far back.
I
know the uranium facial was a thing that far back.
Oh yeah, radioactive water.
Oh yeah, weird, right? Yeah, it was a big thing until some woman's jaw fell off.
Yikes.
So
Wait,
it gave you that healthy glow.
Oh yeah, I bet it did. I bet it did.
So, so
1850, Swedish.
what?
Became fashionable in the 30s.
The gut shaker?
Yeah, it was more fashionable in the early 1930s.
Huh.
Oh, Lord.
But yeah, they
So
were.
wait a minute. It was from the 1850s, but it made it to the 1930s?
I guess that's when it caught on.
Wow.
It was in Sweden.
No, I
Coming
mean,
out.
oh my
It took
God.
time to cross the
So I was
pond.
at the IX Center for a convention or whatever, and they had these new things you stand on them, and they shake you, and they shake your ass, and I think it's just like the belt shaker thing. And I'm like, you updated the belt shaker thing. That's all you did.
What kind of convention was this?
So, a garden show.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm an old man now, apparently.
It sounded more entertaining than that. That's why.
Yeah, sold dildos and dildo accessories.
Excellent.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess we never really get away from the whole snake oil thing, right?
Oh no,
Yeah.
it was huge in the turn of the century, but we're still doing it now with the ShamWow and all that.
Right? Yeah, you just rebrand it, and
There's
Shut your mouth. The ShamWow is amazing.
It actually
ShamWow isn't bad.
It actually
But
is.
this is the poppycock scenario.
Right.
Roughly 70% of it works.
Right.
So, enough of it works where we keep buying the stuff that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So some of her things are kind of shake weighty, and some of them are kind of like OxyClean, right?
Yeah, but if the shake weight gets you going, hey,
Oh my god, that was the most unfortunate invention.
Well, when you add the lotion dispenser to
Oh!
it. No? All right.
Wow.
When an invention doesn't quite hit the mark, you just add features to it.
I don't know that lotion is
No?
the way to go there.
All right.
Probably not.
I mean, it worked on South Park, I guess.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
All right, so we're saying that the invention element fairly everywhere,
What?
but more so, of course, if you're in.
I think vastly more so with them, but yeah, definitely aspects of it all over.
And then, but magic not so much.
I feel like our vibe kind of inches towards magic being strictly like spells, and like you said, kitchen witchery and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then and the cost, the trade-off.
But I think occultism is probably largely accepted as a thing. I just don't think
Sure.
that visible magic is necessarily
that,
thought of
like,
as,
yeah.
right. It's like, oh, well,
Telekinesis
maybe
and all
you have the
that,
gumption
yeah.
to talk to ghosts, but there's no way you're affecting the forces of the universe. I don't know. I just feel like it's
right. Well, I'm sure there's probably a lot of religious people that are ticked off at the notion of you doing this or that, but equally,
Sure.
there's plenty of people who are like, oh, that's interesting or whatever.
Right.
I mean, especially in the city, it's a whole different vibe. To them, it's just another avenue of exploration, another science.
Okay, so that's another
And you had the
thing
spiritualist
that we
movement, remember?
didn't really touch on is there a negative feeling towards the occultism and stuff like that?
well, I think sure, yeah. I think that
Yes and no, depends on the circle.
Well, but that's the thing, right? So the aristocrats accepted Crowley, but mostly he was
A party favor.
he was a party. They invited him because he was the weird guy who would do the shot of shit you poured in front of him,
He wore mascara and got in arguments.
And right, you invited him along because he was the weirdo that hey, I know Crowley. What, really? All right, we're going along, and then he does something weird for you, and got you status points, and then you make fun
Yeah,
of
you
him.
probably had
behind
50 extra people turn out just because they knew he was coming.
But yeah, and then everybody kind of talks about him behind his back later.
Yeah, kind of the way we, would talk about, and I'm brain farting. Yes.
Okay.
Most famous guy in radio.
Howard Stern.
Yes.
I don't know.
It was much like that. I mean, he's as much beloved as he's hated.
I guess. Well, I think with Stern, they're not the same group. I'm saying with Crowley, I think it was, I think he was seen as a circus freak.
But yeah, I'm saying he's an attraction regardless.
Entertainment.
Right. Yeah. But he did evoke, a certain amount of people to start their own cults and stuff
Right.
like that as well.
Okay, so it's somewhat prominent, but they're still the people who.
And I think it's largely, covered in skepticism. And so, it's like, oh, well,
So they imagine it's all fake.
yeah.
But at the same time, there's people who assume you're going to burn in hell.
Or
if
they're
you
looking to
participate.
I was going to say,
off of it,
I honestly think the poorer you go in the society of this time period, the more the religiosity increases. So amongst the very poor, you would be very hated and assumed to have power, even when you don't.
Okay.
So if you're
You're
tricking
saying the poor are less likely to be involved in the occult and more likely to be judgmental against them.
I think so.
That makes sense to me.
And yeah, and the more in the middle, I think you're going to have people just going,
Yeah, either way.
you're crazy, you're silly,
I gotta go to work.
right?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly how I
Time
see
for your
it.
shit. Yeah, I mean,
Which is probably the majority of the people in London at that time.
Or can I eat it? Then leave me alone.
Right.
So, all right, I think it's a pretty simple setting.
Yeah, it is. I think it's pretty straightforward.
I think the minutia is, of course, where it's all going to be, and that's what I'm saying. And I think in a case like this, the way we're approaching writing this, normally I would go and set forth a bunch of things I've come up with, but find a need, fill a need is, I think, the best way to approach this. Is what would be good here? What do we? All right, we're going up against this kind of creature. What would they have to invent to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Or what kind of, situation do we have to pen this into?
Well,
and create something to do that.
To bookend this to what we started the conversation with, I think this is very similar to the bottom-up style, because we're focusing on the characters and the world. We're in London. They're not likely to ever travel outside of London in the course of the story. I don't see it really happening.
Right. So we've got the
So
story
we don't
penned in.
need world building.
And you don't
really.
need a map. You can just download one of London in those times.
Right.
So, but not to mention, I'm not sure we're ever going to mention anything by name except for old lady so-and-so's house. I mean...
Well, I might mention some, like, ancient street. Like, I was talking about, like, Whitechapel was one that comes up a lot in the, Sherlock Holmes.
I mean, definitely knowing a few things about the city is helpful, so...
Yeah, major landmarks maybe,
Right.
but I don't think that we need, we
Yeah,
don't
you
need to
can't
know
write
the nearest
completely
mountain range.
blind about an area,
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure, saying that the setting is London and then coming up with the basics of the idea is probably more than enough, because this is going to take place in...
Your head.
Yeah, generic place, whatever.
A neighborhood, houses and stuff,
Right. So this is probably one of the more simple ways to do it. I generally create much larger things.
Although I do really wonder if there's a Baker Street now. Like, if there never was, but now there is. 22-1 Baker Street? Sherlock Holmes? It's like the most famous address everyone knows.
Bleecker Street?
Baker.
Okay.
Sure.
Really? No one else? Okay. Just me.
All right, so we're going to come back at this next week with...
Story? Right?
Okay.
Right.
Right, so we're going into 3, 4, and 5?
No, chapters 2 and 3 are done. We're on 4 and 5.
Okay. So we'll see you next week.
Greetings, dames and knights. If you like what we do, follow us on Twitter at thedarkandstormyknights1 or our website at thedarkandstormyknights.home.blog. Or you can rate us on Podbean, Google Play Music, or iTunes.